What is the gospel? What is the gospel, right? And is there a chance that we have looked at all that it offers only from one angle? If you did not know tonight, the word gospel, someone say gospel. Maybe you've heard this word before, maybe you haven't. This word simply means good news. Someone say it's good. This word, the gospel, the word gospel means good news, but hearing something, how many know, hearing that something is good and knowing why something is good are two totally different things. Yeah. And that's exactly why we are starting this brand new series tonight titled Prism. Prism. Someone say Prism. In this series, as we take a closer look at the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, okay, we will find that the good news of Easter may be bigger, better, bolder than you probably ever could have imagined. And this is why I want to talk about this. And hopefully in doing so, my prayer is that we would discover a new way of engaging Jesus. And specifically, over the next several weeks, over the next 5 weeks, we're going to be talking about 5 things that Jesus wished that you knew and would never forget. 5 things that Jesus wished that each and every person within the sound of my voice, he wished that you would know with confidence and that you would never forget these truths. The title for tonight's message is simply this: Closer Than You Know. Closer than you know. If you're taking notes, you can write that at the top. You know, from a distance, it can be hard to truly know somebody, right? It's just really hard from a distance. You can't tell a lot about a person just from simply looking at them, right? For instance, if maybe the only time you ever see me or have heard me talk or whatever, or hung out with me is on a Wednesday night, right? Chances are you probably aren't going to know a whole lot about me, right? Chances are you probably don't know that for a good portion of my life, almost half of my life, I lived and grew up in Northern California. You probably didn't know that my favorite sport is soccer. You probably didn't know that I have an intense fear of sharks, right? And because of that fear of sharks, I did not learn how to swim until I was 14 years old. True story, straight up, right? I did not want to get anywhere near the water. Even pools had sharks to me, y'all, okay? I wasn't about it, all right? But there's lots of things that you probably would not know just from simply looking at me. And this got me thinking, right? This got me thinking about all the things that we just don't know about each other, right? And so if you have social media, you've probably seen that we posted a question on social media, and the question was this: what's one thing most people couldn't know about you just from looking at you? And we had many answers to this question, right? One person said, my personality. Well, yeah, like you can't tell somebody's personality just from simply looking at them. Right? Another person said the fact that I'm the oldest of all my siblings, or another person said that all my siblings are adopted. Another person said that you can't tell just from looking at me that I'm extremely fearful of heights, right? Or one person said my love for tacos. Come on, right? Your love for tacos. I can't tell that you love tacos just by looking at you, all right? And so another person said my backstory, right? I can't know your backstory just from simply looking at you. And then another person said, what was it? It was that I'm not always serious about everything, right? Maybe they take this person too seriously. And so there's lots of different things that you just can't see just by looking at somebody, simply put. And so I think we all have things about us that no one knows, right? And in some ways, every person is like a prism. Someone say prism. Okay, so how many of you know what a prism is? By show of hands, all right? You may have heard about these things in science class, okay? Maybe you haven't, maybe you were sleeping, I don't know, all right? But if you were, you missed out on what a prism is, all right? But I'm about to tell you, okay? Now listen, this is a nice piece of glass. There's not a whole lot to it, right? It's nice, it's smooth. You know, I probably wouldn't use it as a windshield. It's too small, okay? But it's just a normal piece of glass, all right? Now, looking at this piece of glass, you probably can't tell much about it. Other than like it's a shape, kind of a triangle. And so there's not a whole lot you can tell about it just from simply looking at it. All right, so here's the deal, though. Is this prism or this piece of glass, when light shines on it in a specific way, it does something that you can't see but just by simply looking at it. And so if I blind you, I'm sorry, but this is an illustration, so bear with me. Okay, so now it took me a while to figure this out, y'all. Now this is cheap, okay? I got it off Amazon for like $14, all right? So bear with me, all right? But the point is still the same. Everybody look to your left. See that on the wall? What is that? Rainbow. Come on, somebody. Who knew that your pastor could make a rainbow? Come on, let's go. A rainbow, right? And so there's no way that if you had no idea what a prism was, or you just thought this was a piece of glass, just by looking at it, you had no idea that it had the capacity to create colors that it does not display. Likewise, many of us, just by simply looking at you, I can't know everything there is about you. The truth is, even if you know plenty of people and other people know you, you can still live your life with this feeling like nobody really knows me. Nobody really knows me. And here's what I mean. We all experience loneliness at times, right? All of us. Whether you have close friends or acquaintances, right? Whether you have large groups to hang out with or just a few friends, whether you have a constant stream of communication with your friends or just a few text messages here and there. Regardless, there are times when it's easy to feel like, one, we don't really fit in, and two, no one really knows us. We don't really fit in, and no one really knows us. In fact, there's actual research about this. I was reading a survey this week, and it talked about middle school and high school students. Okay, and the survey, on the day the survey was taken, it showed that 40% of students, 40% of students feel alone and disconnected from others most of the time. What does that mean? Imagine your classes at school. Take 10 people. 4 of those 10 people feel alone and disconnected from others most of the time. There's a big chunk of students in here where you feel alone and disconnected most of the time. Think about it this way. You know, most of us, for most of us, it can feel like there's a barrier between us and other people, right? And so many of us, we live our lives. And it's pretty bad, if we were to be honest. Because most of us, we're living our lives right now feeling like nobody really sees us or that we can hardly see anybody else. And I don't know if you can see me right now or not. This curtain's not super thick, but maybe you feel, like I said, alone a lot. Maybe you feel like you can't connect with people. Maybe you feel like you have a hard time making friends. Maybe you just constantly are feeling like no one gets you. And so you're living your life where it's like, I can hear people. I can probably guess what they're doing. But I can't really connect with them. There's something in the way. There's a barrier. There's a curtain. There's a wall that I just can't seem to get past. And I don't believe that God wants us to live this way. I don't believe that at all. But many of us, we feel this way. And with that being said, I want you to know that 2 simple things are true. If you're taking notes, 1, everybody feels this way. Everyone feels this way. Literally everybody. The popular person, they feel alone and disconnected at times. That person with lots of friends, them too. The couple that are dating, they feel lonely at times too. The single person, yep, them too. And this isn't even just a teenager thing. You can ask any adult in this room, including myself, and we'll tell you that there are moments in our lives where we feel alone and disconnected from other people. I just don't feel like I'm really connecting with anyone. And so the feeling is that we're disconnected or somehow separated from others. And this feeling is pretty common for most humans. So that's the first thing. Everybody feels this way. But then number two, we're all pretty sure that it's not supposed to feel this way. We're all pretty sure that it's not supposed to feel this way. Like there's something within us that screams out, I should not feel alone. Why do I feel all by myself all the time? I believe that there's a deep desire within every person. I don't care who you are, where you grew up, how many siblings you have, or who your parents are. There is a deep desire within you, if you are honest with yourself, to be fully known and fully loved. You want someone to fully know you, to connect with you, and for you to be fully known in that state as well. Something in us tells us that we're not meant to live feeling alone or like an outsider. I can't explain it, but we feel it. We weren't created to live like this. And sometimes we can feel that way about God too. Right now, some of you, you've grown up and you've experienced and we're taught that God is close. That God actually cares about you. But for some of you, it was quite the opposite. You grew up experiencing and being taught that God is distant, that God is far, that God is abstract, that God is cold, that God he's up there probably, but I don't really believe that he actually cares about the things that are going on in my life. We all find ourselves on one end of the spectrum most of the time. You know, the idea of Jesus sounds nice, but let's be honest, as incredible as it is that Jesus died on the cross for our sins, it doesn't really feel like it helps a whole lot when we're feeling alone and disconnected from everybody. And so in the same way that people are like prisms, Jesus is too. Jesus is too. And when you take a look beyond what you see on the surface, you see something absolutely incredible. You know, lots of people have ideas about Jesus, who he was, what he came to do, what his mission was here while he was on earth, what happened to him. Lots of people have lots of ideas about who Jesus is. And typically they come up around this time of year, the Easter time of year, right? Because this is a time of year where we focus on the life, the death, and the resurrection specifically of Jesus. And so many people have lots of ideas. And so in the spirit of Easter, to kick off the Easter season, we're going to go right to that moment. The end of Jesus' life. But first, I want to talk about the culture and the environment, the time that Jesus lived in, because I believe this is so important. Okay, Jesus lived in ancient Israel, okay, and grew up in first century Jewish culture, which is just a fancy way of saying that all these people, this time that Jesus grew up in, was very religious. Okay, and a huge part of their life, a huge part of this culture was this thing called the temple. Someone say the temple. Okay, and we're going to talk about this for a minute because I believe that this shows us something, right? And this will help us see something incredible about Jesus later. Okay, the temple was basically just a core religious aspect of these people at this time, okay? And this wasn't like, you have to understand that around this time, everything was religious, okay? It wasn't just like they go to church, but this is like everything about their way of life was religious. How they dressed, how they talked, what they ate, when they could celebrate certain things, when they could do certain things, how they would talk to people, how they would treat other people. And because of that, the temple wasn't just some place that they went to occasionally, like a church. This was a hub for community in culture. I actually have a picture of the temple court system at that time. Throw that up. Boom. Come on. Look at that thing. Whoo! That's nice. I don't know how long that took to make, but whoever made it, great job. If you can hear me right now, great job. Probably not. Okay, so this is important to understand, okay, because you have a lot of things going on here. All right, so the temple, understand that different parts of the temple were for different people. Meaning, if depending on who you were, you could only go in certain parts. I'll explain. This whole outside part was reserved for people who were, quote unquote, Gentiles, meaning people who were not Jewish. You could not go any further inside the temple. And then you had Jewish women. Jewish women, whoo, they could step in the door. Come on, somebody. They'd walk right in here. Come on. And they'd hang out right here. That was reserved for the Jewish women. And then you have the Jewish men. They could go even closer to the center of the temple. And then you have the religious leaders, the priests, who could probably go the closest. The whole thing was built so that people kept their distance from the center of the temple, a place called the Holy of Holies. And it was sectioned off by a curtain. A curtain. In fact, even the most important priest was only allowed to go behind the curtain one time per year. This area was a reminder of God's presence in heaven and on earth. And the curtains represented a separation between God and humans. It kept separate what was sacred. And so it's kind of like a museum. Who's been to a museum before? It's kind of like a museum, okay? There's some things, how many you could probably get away with, touching it a little bit, right? Some of you crossed the rope when you weren't supposed to, right? Okay, some of you are laughing because you did it, okay? So, hey, it's a lot like a museum. There was things that you could probably get pretty close to. There's some things that you could probably even touch if you were sneaky enough. But just like any museum, boy, there's some things where you can't get close, right? They've got it marked off by ropes. It's behind glass. You can't even touch it. Lord, if you touch it, something bad's going to happen to you. And the same was kind of the same way for the temple. The Holy of Holies was like the part of the museum that no one could even enter. The majority of people could not enter unless under certain circumstances, right? And so the point is this: the culture Jesus lived in had a lot of separation. And so the disconnection that you and I feel and the feeling of loneliness was not only something that the people of Jesus' time felt, it was a physical reality. They were separated from each other. People were separated, and they were separated from the place that represented the presence of God. And so how do we get from that to Easter and this whole idea of a prism? Understand that many Jewish people hoped that when Jesus would come, that he would save them from the Romans, the Roman Empire. They were wanting Jesus to be a political leader who would come and overthrow the Roman government. Why? Because Rome at the time was oppressing the Jewish people. It made it really hard for them to live. And so they were hoping and praying that when Jesus came, the Messiah came, that he would free them from that bondage. But how many know Jesus came to free them from something else? A deeper need that they weren't even aware of. But although they wanted him to come and set them free from the Romans, actually quite the opposite happened. The Romans arrested Jesus for made-up reasons, took him through a shady court system and framed him, and then sentenced him to death. Matthew, a close follower of Jesus, reported what happened next after he was sentenced to death. In Matthew 27, verses 33 through 37 says this: "And they came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. They offered Jesus wine to drink mixed with gall. But after tasting it, he refused to drink it because it was sour. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots, and sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Above his head, they placed the written charge against him, saying this is Jesus, the King of the Jews. So here we see Jesus is in the middle or towards the tail end of what we call crucifixion. Now, what you need to know about crucifixion is crucifixion was a type of torture, the worst type of torture that the Romans practiced. Okay, and this kind of torture was not only meant to kill the person, but it was also meant to scare everybody watching. And so, therefore, they did it in a very public way. And so, they not only beat Jesus, they not only whipped him, they not only cut open his flesh, they not only spat on him and drug him across the ground, they not only did all these things, but they insulted him. They abused him. They mocked him, as well as brutally murdering him, all in the same process. And as he died, I want you to check out what happens. Just a few verses later, in verses 50 and 51, it says this: "And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom." The curtain that separated God and humans. Because of Jesus' death, the curtain was torn apart. It was no longer a factor. How did he do that? I'm glad you asked. I have no idea. No idea. But what I do know is that his message was clear. Okay, and his message was this: that the days of separation were over forever. In one moment, Jesus changed everything. Everything. He made it perfectly clear what his life was about up until this point. No more curtain, no more barrier, no more wall, no more separation between us and God, nothing. You may feel distant from your friends and your family, but the reality is this: God is close. God's always there. And you may feel like other people don't know you or don't understand you, but the reality is God does. Jesus turned the world upside down, defeated death, and tore the curtain from top to bottom to prove to us that we were meant to be close. You were meant to be close to God, not separated or alone. You can think of it this way: one of the things that Jesus wishes that you knew and would never forget is simply this: you can be close to God. You can be close to God. You may feel disconnected from everyone else around you, but you never have to feel disconnected from God. There's no curtain between God and you. Jesus came to show us that God is there, no matter what, right with you. And so as for today, what does this idea of Jesus closing the gap mean for us? Because for some of you, this idea may be totally new. You had no idea that closeness with God could even be something that you experience. You feel like God has been distant. I don't hear from God. I pray, I try, I do all these things, but I don't experience him. Today, I want you to begin to reconsider what Jesus' life and death proved to be true. That you can be confident that because of Jesus, you can be close to God. And as we close, I think it's also important to understand that in the same way that you feel disconnected, other people have times where they feel alone, unknown, and unloved too. And as people who have relationships with God, we have an incredible opportunity to let other people know that they have the ability to be close to God too. And this is why small groups is so important, because there's going to be days, y'all, where you don't feel good, where you feel like you're alone, where you feel like I just have nobody gets me, no one understands. And that's when the people in your small group can be like, hey, I understand. I've been there before. What I need to remind you of is that God is close to you. And this is the reality. Our emotions will tell us that people don't get us. And when those things happen, let them remind you that you have a God who wants to be close to you. And not only wants to be close to you, actually proved it by sending his son to die for you so that you will never have to feel alone or disconnected ever again. Man, Jesus wishes that you knew that you could be close to God. You don't have to feel alone anymore. Let's pray.